Hi there, welcome. This is the Kelly's Astrology podcast, where you can find insight, guidance, and understanding through astrology. I'm Kelly, and I'll be your host. Hey there, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Kelly's Astrology podcast. Today, I'm going to take a look at the week starting January 20th. And that means I'm going to be talking a little bit about Pluto in Aquarius, since Pluto is moving into Aquarius on the 20th, January 20th, if you're in the US and Canada. That move of Pluto into Aquarius will slowly start to filter through on Sunday the 21st if you're in the UK, Europe, or Australia. Before we dive into some of the highlights of this longer trend of Pluto in Aquarius, I want to let you know about a special in-person event I'm leading in Palm Springs at the end of January. There are just a couple of spots left, so if you would like to take a mini break away from your regular life, we can learn and connect through astrology. You'll want to register today. You can register via the astrologyuniversity.com website. Over 3 days in Palm Springs at the end of the month, I'm going to take you through all the highlights of the major astrological themes for 2024. And I'm going to teach you a couple of timing techniques that you can use in your personal chart to identify your own cycles and patterns for the year ahead. In addition to timing with transits, you'll also learn the technique of progressions, as well as how to work with some of the planetary periods. You'll learn a mix of ancient and newer timing techniques to help you deepen your understanding of yourself, your cycles, and how to forecast with astrology. I'll share the direct link below, but you can find out details via my website, kellysastrology.com. Just go to the calendar tab, or you can register directly on the astrologyuniversity.com website. I hope to see you in Palm Springs at the end of January. So coming back to this week, the week starting January 20th, Pluto is actually going to spend most of this year in the sign of Aquarius. Pluto will briefly return to Capricorn for about 10 weeks, kind of September, October, November. But by the time we get to around November 19th or 20th, Pluto will have moved into Aquarius, where it will stay for the next 20 years. So one thing to keep in mind is that while I'm talking about Pluto in Aquarius in the context of being a major event for this particular week, January 2024, it's actually so much more than that as well, because Pluto moving into Aquarius is very much a dramatic, huge astrological event that is going to shape the next 2 decades. Yes, Pluto will be in Aquarius for the next 20 years. So for the last 15 years, since 2008, Pluto has been traveling through Capricorn. And as a result, Pluto in Capricorn has really helped contribute to this kind of deconstruction around some of the core pillars and systems in society, especially those to do with banking and finance, as well as supports for those that are in challenging situations. Pluto in Capricorn has also been a time of taking a more honest and factual look at history and updating the way the past is viewed. Now, Aquarius is a very different sign to Capricorn. Aquarius is focused on the future, whereas Capricorn is very concerned about the past. Aquarius is also about creating a vision for society, like a future ideal to move towards that can really help improve circumstances and opportunities for as many people as possible. As a sign, Aquarius really isn't interested in celebrating specific individuals. We have to remember that Aquarius is the sign where the sun has its detriment. So the longer trend of Pluto in Aquarius can be a time of major change around how we select, elect, and define our leaders. And what we might see is some really big shifts away from centralized centers of power towards more regional or smaller centers of power. Pluto in Aquarius can also bring a lot more diversity into leadership roles, leadership figures, and organizations that have a lot to do with leadership. Aquarius is an air sign, and so it's very much about movement and the idea of things being dispersed, the spreading out of things. This is something that the air element does. The earth element, which we're just coming out of Pluto's transit through Capricorn, that's very much more about accumulation and matter and material things. Air it's about ideas, you know, how quickly ideas can spread, good ideas and bad ideas. It's almost as though, you know, when you've been, think about in the autumn when the leaves come off the trees and you rake them all up and then a really strong wind blows and the leaves all get scattered again. That idea of that wind blowing and scattering or moving things around, that's kind of the elemental experience of air. Now, we're already in this longer air elemental period that has to do with a conjunction between Jupiter and Saturn that happened in Aquarius in December of 2020. So it's just really interesting that since late 2020, the first sign change Pluto is going to make is actually to bring it into an air sign. So there's this real extra intensity of the elemental qualities of air coming out into life, into society, into the world. And look, I'm not suggesting that we're going to go through all of these major social and cultural changes just this weekend, but it's an important thing to note the start of a period which is going to be different from the period before, and to get a sense of what this longer chapter might be about. You know, as Pluto shifts into Aquarius, it's very much as though these winds of change are starting to blow through our lives. They're kind of blowing out the habits and the traditions to do with the old ways of doing things. And they're really going to change our perspective. So things that maybe we're really familiar with, we might start to realize that they're a bit dated or a bit out of touch. This weekend, January 20th or 21st, the sun is actually going to follow Pluto into Aquarius. So we're getting this sort of extra emphasis on Aquarius energy that kicks in really strongly this weekend. And this combination of the sun and Pluto in Aquarius will last for the next 4 weeks. Then the sun will move into Pisces and carry on its regular journey through the sky and through the zodiac. But Pluto will, of course, be staying put in Aquarius for a really long time. So with the sun and Pluto together in Aquarius, this is actually the first time we've had this combination, the first time in more than 200 years. And so as the sun and Pluto come into Aquarius, this kind of breath of fresh air blows in, you might start to view life through a new lens. There are some particular topics and industries that may be especially activated or intense over the next couple of decades with Pluto in Aquarius. Things like space and technology, artificial intelligence, robotics, philosophy, any of those kind of big ideas, science and technology. There's Pluto in Aquarius can bring innovation in a variety of areas, but particularly in some of those Aquarius kind of high thinking zones. It'll also really highlight anything to do with air and space travel and matters pertaining to the quality of the air that we're breathing, for instance. Since Aquarius is an air sign, the ideas that govern and inform our lives, from big ideas to kind of everyday concepts, they're going to be questioned, examined, and kind of pulled apart just to see if they're still kind of the right ideas or concepts to be using as a foundation or a platform. And as a result, it might be that it becomes really obvious that some of the ideas that underpin key areas of life, your life personally and, you know, social and cultural life at large, that they may need to be updated with kind of a fresh or more current point of view. To give you an example, one big idea that emerged during a previous transit of Pluto in Aquarius was about the rights and potential capabilities of women. So the last time Pluto was in Aquarius was actually in 1778. So from December 1778 right through to April of 1797. I know that was a really long time ago, nearly 250 years ago. And that's about how long it takes Pluto to complete a full tour of the zodiac. This is why when Pluto changes signs, it's such an exceptional kind of event, because for all of us alive now, we've not lived through the transit of Pluto in Aquarius. We can look back in history at previous periods of Pluto in Aquarius to get a sense of what may come forward. And then, of course, we're going to bring current and modern technologies, ways of living, points of view into how we express that experience, that cycle now. So in this period, December 1778, to April of 1797, you know, it was a pretty dramatic time in history. I've got just a highlight of just a few events that happened there, and then I'll come back to this big idea about the rights and potential of women. So in 1788, just a few years after Pluto went into Aquarius the last time, 1781, William Herschel discovered the planet Uranus. And Uranus was the first of the new or modern planets to be discovered. This was an incredibly groundbreaking discovery because it totally turned upside down the way space and the cosmos and the solar system was viewed. It turned out to be much bigger than scientists and philosophers and astronomers had previously thought. And it's not that I'm necessarily predicting the exact same things are going to happen, but this particular discovery totally reshaped the way humans thought about space. And so I think that's a parallel we could draw between events in the previous Pluto in Aquarius cycle to possible events in this upcoming Pluto in Aquarius cycle. Now, that period in the late 18th century was also a time of great political and social upheaval, with things like the American Revolutionary War, which saw the US have its independence recognized by Britain. We also had British settlement in Australia in that period. That was 1787, 1788. And in France, we had the start of the French Revolution in that Pluto in Aquarius period. And again, it's not that I'm trying to make everyone afraid about revolutions happening in the next 20 years, but I think there are some really key points, in those events in terms of groups of people wanting autonomy from power centers or authority figures that had previously had a level of control over them. It wasn't a perfect time in history, not saying that at all. But just the idea of the old ways were really resisted and pushed back on at that particular point. So there's just, as I said, this is just a very tiny snapshot just to give you a couple of ideas. And then to come back to this concept or this idea that there might be more to women than was thought, in 1792, a book called The Vindication of the Rights of Women was published, which is considered to be one of our earliest kind of feminist works. And this book talked about how women had the potential to be as capable and intelligent as men, and that the reason they weren't like that yet was not because women couldn't get there, but because young girls weren't being educated. And so that idea sort of planted the seed that then helped to kind of germinate through subsequent generations to even lead to things like some of the feminist political movements to get women the right to vote. Things moved very slowly, but that germ of an idea that was really encapsulated in that particular publication really helped provide a seed that then flourished in future generations. So when I mentioned this concept of Pluto in Aquarius being about questioning some of the ideas, for that period in time in the late 1800s, the idea that, women could own property or vote or make decisions or accumulate wealth, that wasn't necessarily something that was available to all women. And so these ideas where we're kind of thinking about an egalitarian approach or more diversity for resources and opportunities, I do think that's very much a part of the Pluto in Aquarius cycle. The last transit of Pluto through Aquarius also corresponded to the first humans going up in a hot air balloon, which happened in 1783. So this was the first time that humans actually left the Earth, like we went up into a level of space. And I think that event of this idea of humans going in hot air balloons had been around for a little while. That wasn't a totally new invention in 1783, but the idea of people going in it and moving from one place to another, that was what was really new and groundbreaking at that time. And I think that is piece of history, if you like, is an important omen for the major changes that we might see around both air and space travel over the next 20 years as Pluto tours Aquarius. So just taking that brief walk through history, Pluto moving into Aquarius is going to subtly but profoundly and permanently reshape the world. It's going to change the way we see what's possible. It's going to open us up to things that just seemed like, impossible. How could that be? So that idea of like the future coming now is part of this Pluto in Aquarius time. It's also going to influence the way we interact with each other, from things like trade and negotiation to diplomacy and geopolitical matters. Borders and boundaries will also move and shift, and we're going to see that idea of large groups of people moving from one part of the globe to another. Maybe this is because of climate, maybe it's because of political matters, maybe it's because of famine and lack of food. It can be for a variety of reasons, but we're going to see a lot more migration, if you like. Now, this is a huge process, as you can appreciate, and it's going to really take the majority of this next 20 years of that Pluto in Aquarius cycle for the influences of this new cycle to kind of filter down into changes in everyday life and society. So as you're thinking about all that, it's, it's very conceptual, it's very kind of up here, very heady energy, which is very Aquarius. So you might be thinking, how do I kind of connect with this, or what do I do with this? As a way of perhaps greeting or tuning into this new undercurrent of energy, I'd really encourage you to begin to question what you normally just accept. This might have to do with ideas about food and the way you eat, from what to eat or when to eat. It might be about how you connect with others and construct or conduct your relationships. It might be ideas about work and why you work or how you should work. Maybe there are ideas to do with wellness or creativity or parenting. The idea here is having a really sort of thoughtful conversation with yourself that invites you to ask why. Why is this like that? Why do I do this thing in that way? You might even consider why something is important to you, or ask even, is this important to me? And this sort of deeply investigative approach is so Pluto in an air sign, isn't it? The idea of deeply examining ideas, beliefs, and concepts. Ideas, beliefs, and concepts, they're not tangible things. They're air sign things. They're stuff that we are influenced by, just like a wind or a breeze. You can't really hold it in your hands, but you can feel it moving by you. And ideas and concepts, these are all things that we're influenced by, even though we can't necessarily like touch it, so to speak. So the idea here is to really reflect on or examine and explore some of the underlying ideas that inform your life and your experiences. And I think that can be very thought-provoking. And in some ways, for some of us, it can actually be quite freeing when you might realize that you're doing something because of a priority for someone else, or because of old conditioning. And you think, actually, if I was to choose how I would conduct that area of my life now, based on who I am in the present, I'd go about it differently. So then it's like, great, let's do it differently. Anytime Pluto is active, what you're really trying to do is bring something that's been hidden or unconscious, something that's been operating without awareness, into a place of awareness. Oh, that's where that comes from, or this is why I do that. And then you can sort of reflect or sit with that. Do I want to keep doing it? Do I want to keep doing it in that way? Is that still important enough? And that's where we start to get our own personal evolution coming in. A little bit like, with this Pluto influence, the idea of realizing something you didn't know, or seeing something for what it is, or even understanding where something really comes from. So this sort of Sun and Pluto going together into Aquarius is an opportunity for a little bit of a realization that might open you up in some capacity. So starting this weekend, Pluto comes into Aquarius, and you might find that you are more open to a fresh perspective than you have been in a really long time. It doesn't necessarily mean you'll have a fresh perspective about everything in your life, but probably about one or two areas that are a little bit of a conundrum for you. You might get a bit of a realization or an idea worth exploring. This weekend, January 20th and 21st, is also part of that longer closing out process of that Pluto in Capricorn transit. So that Pluto in Capricorn transit that's been going on for 15 years, that is ending. This isn't the final end, but it's an important closing stage in that longer Pluto in Capricorn transit. And so it may be that you're actually in a place this weekend of ending something, of shutting down something that's been important in your life for a really long time, like perhaps that 15 years. So you might think about, Oh, yeah, there is this 15-year thread or topic or area of my life that is either major change or closing down and being shut down completely. So, if working through endings is where you find yourself now, I'd encourage you to really just dive in and go all in on the shutdown, close off in a really complete or final way. Shutting something down in a very conscious way, but also in a very complete way, is actually going to help you reclaim some energy and space so that you've got more capacity for curiosity going forward. And that curiosity is going to be a huge asset for you for the future, for this next Pluto in Aquarius cycle. So, thanks so much for joining me, everyone. If you are enjoying the podcast, please like, subscribe, or follow along wherever you're listening. I hope you enjoyed this very brief introduction to the longer trend of Pluto in Aquarius that is going to subtly, slowly, but surely, and very profoundly reshape the way we live over the next few years. That's it from me for now. I'll be back to share more next week. Until then, everyone, take care.